What's up, team? Today we are talking scatter plots and trend lines. We have our learning target here. It says I can create a scatter plot from a set of data and use a trend line to make predictions from the data. So that's what we are getting ourselves into today. Let's start with some data. So I made this up, not real life data, but we're going to use it for our example here. So on the X column here, the inputs, we have the average number of hours spent on YouTube each week. So this person spends 15 hours a week on YouTube. This person spends 1 hour, 30 hours, 24 and a half hours, and 25 hours. So we have some big YouTube fans here. And then on the other side, we have the output of the function, the number of breakfasts skipped this month. So the person who spends 15 hours a week on YouTube skips breakfast twice. The person who spends 1 hour on YouTube a week skips 0 breakfast. 30-hour a week skips 15 breakfasts, so half the days they didn't eat breakfast. 24 and a half hours a week, they skipped 10 breakfasts. And the last person here, they skipped 7 breakfasts this week. So what we're going to do is we're going to take these 5 data points, we're going to plot them over here on what we call a scatter plot, and they're not going to form a straight line. This isn't a situation where we connect the dots, throw arrows at both ends, and say, look what we did. This is a situation where we have to plot all the points and make some observations and see if there's any sort of trend going on. Does it seem like this data impacts this data? Is there any relationship between these two different variables, the input and the output in this case? So let's plot some dots. Let's see what happens here. So the first one, we have an input of 15 and an output of X. We know that inputs are always our X values, outputs are always our Y values. I noticed I just said X here. I meant to say 2. So we have an input of 15 and output of 2. So when we plot this point, we're going to find 15 on the x-axis, and we're going to go up to 2 on the y-axis. So there it is, 15, comma 2. The next one, we have 1, 0. So we're going to go 1 on the x-axis, and we don't go up at all. So it's going to be right down here, 1, 0. Next, 30, 15. So input of 30, output of 15. So we're going to go all the way to 30 on the x's and all the way up to 15 on the y's right here. So 30, comma 15. Third one, we have 24 and a half and 10. This one's going to be very imprecise. I don't have decimals up here. That's okay. We're looking for a decent representation here, or a decent estimate. So 24 and a half, that's really close to 24. And we're going to go up to 10, which is right about here. So 24.5 and 10. And the last one is 25 and 7. So it's just going to be a little bit to the right of that last one, but we're only going up to 7 this time. So 25, 7. Okay, here are our 5 pieces of data. And now, again, I told you they weren't going to form a straight line. They definitely don't form a straight line. We can't connect all these in a perfectly straight line. That wouldn't work. So what we can do, however, is we can make an estimate. We can make a guess based on the data we see here. So it appears to me, when I look at this, it looks like it's generally going up, meaning that the more hours a person spends on YouTube each week, the less they eat breakfast. And that's not especially surprising. Instead of eating, maybe they're spending that time, watching videos, creating videos, or whatever the case may be. And I'm not saying that's good or bad. I'm just saying that that's a realistic possibility. So if we were to make a guess as to the trend here, we can create what we call a trend line. And a trend line is a line that's going to be straight. We could come up with an equation for it in slope-intercept form. But it's going to be like an estimate of this data. So one way to, just one simple way to make a guess at this is if you have an even number of points, try to get half the points above your trend line, half the points below your trend line. In this case, we have 5 points, so we can't just do that. We're going to have 3 above, 2 below, or vice versa. Additionally, yeah, they don't quite form a straight line. So if I were to create a trend line here, and my trend line might look slightly different than yours, it would look like this. Try to get a perfectly straight line, something along those lines. this is a trend line basically explaining our data. Now, none of our points are exactly on that line, and that's okay. It's a good estimate, a good rough estimate at the data here. And what we can use this trend line for is say that we had a question, we were curious, like if somebody were to spend 12 hours a week on YouTube, how many breakfasts would we guess that they skipped? Well, we can use our trend line to make a guesstimate or an estimate here. So what we could do is go to 12 on the input, that's the weekly hours spent on YouTube, and then go up to our line, and then take that over to the y-axis, and we could make the guess or make the estimates that if somebody spends 12 hours on YouTube each week, they're going to skip 2.5 breakfasts each month, according to this estimate, according to this data. And you can do that with any of these other data points as well. Is it perfect? No. It's just to give us a good sense of what's going on. Generally, these types of scatter plots are used when you have a ton of data. So say maybe you asked these questions to everybody at our school. You'd get about 1,000 responses. We'd have about 1,000 dots here, and we can actually form a decent trend line that would make some better estimates than me with my made-up 5 pieces of information. So trend line or scatter plots, you're just plotting the points of data that you have, and then the real value to this, the real value to scatter plots is recognizing, is there a positive, what we call correlation? Do they tend to grow together? Maybe there's a negative correlation or no correlation at all. This one, again, limited data, so it's hard to make judgments, but it appears that there is a positive correlation, meaning the more hours spent on YouTube each week, the more breakfasts that are skipped each week as well. Okay, let's look at one more set of data. Here it is. Again, made up data. So on the left column here, the input, we have the number of meals from Chipotle that a student eats each month. So we asked them, hey, how many times do you go to Chipotle? This person said never. This person said, once a week, 4 times a month. This person's like, hey, my parents own Chipotle. I eat there all the time. This person, a couple times a month, maybe more than once a week, once a month or so. And then this is their grade in geometry class in percent, their overall grade. So the student who never eats at Chipotle, 55%. The student who goes about once a week, they have a 71. Students who goes all the time, they have a 98%, and you can see the rest of the data here as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to plot this on a scatter plot, this data here, and we're going to see if there's any sort of trends, any sort of things that we can learn from this data, or is it completely random? So let's think to yourself, does the amount that somebody eats at Chipotle, should that influence their grade in geometry class? My hope is that you answered to yourself, hopefully maybe even out loud, no, it doesn't matter. And we can see that pretty quickly just by looking at the data. So for example, there's only one person here that doesn't eat Chipotle. They are currently failing the class. Is that an indicator? Can I definitely say that if you don't eat Chipotle, you're going to fail geometry? No, that's a silly statement, of course. In the same way, this person eats 20 times a month, and they almost have 100% in the class. Does that mean that you should go to Chipotle every day or 20 times a month so you can, get the A in geometry? No, that's silly, right? And that's further, the fact that that's silly is further, explained to us by this person here who goes like twice a month, and they have 100% in the class. So what is it? Do you go like not very often? Do you go never? And like, how do you get the better grade? Well, there's no correlation between this data. So let's look at it. What I did is, instead of doing it by hand, I plotted this one on Desmos so we can see it a little bit clearer. And here's what it looks like. So on the left here are all the points from the data that was on my whiteboard a moment ago. And here they all are plotted out here. So this means this person eats at Chipotle 4 times a month, and their grade in the class is between 60 and 70. That makes sense. That's this person here. They ate 4 times and have a 71%. So they're all kind of clustered over here, which makes sense. Like, who really goes to Chipotle more than 5 times a month? I'm somebody, admittedly, I love Chipotle, but I'm not going more than 5 times a month, more than likely, unless it's a weird month. So all the data is really going to be, gathered over here. But I don't really see any sort of trends here. You could argue, you could put a zero slope. You could argue maybe it's positive. you could maybe even convince me it could be, I don't know about negative. Um, but what really throws this off is that there are two different data points here where people went twice a month. This person is, barely passing the course, and this person has 100% in the course. That really throws the data off. In addition to that, there's one point way over here. I'm not even sure that you noticed it. It's easy to miss. So this is the person who eats at Chipotle 20 times a month, and they have almost 100% in the class. So drawing a trend line for this particular data, I don't think is a good use of our time. There's just too much going on here, and there's not enough relationship between the number of times somebody eats at Chipotle every month and their grade in geometry class. So for this one, we say there's no correlation. We aren't able to make any predictions from this particular data. In your assignment, you're going to be asked to, you're given some data, create a scatter plot, and then you're going to be making some predictions. You're also, something different, you are going to be coming up with the equation for your trend line. So it's going to be in slope-intercept form. Check my solutions guide. I walk you through how to do all of those pieces. If you have questions, let me know, but I believe in you. I think you got this.